When my father was about 50 years old, he acquired an African gray parrot. He has loved parrots his entire life, so I was happy that he got one after retirement. He named the bird Kevin. My dad taught Kevin a vast vocabulary of words and really trained him to understand the meaning of certain words like hello, how are you, food, thank you, good, and a few others. My father passed away at the age of 70, and with that, the time came to decide between my brothers and I what would happen to Kevin. My brother and sister didn't want the responsibility of taking Kevin into their homes, and their partners were also against it. But I didn't support the idea of rehoming Kevin. Kevin was, and still is, one of my last connections to my father. In a sense he was his best friend. Then decide that I would take him to my house. I placed his cage in the living room of my house, which does not have a basement, so the living room is considered the lowest level of the house. Kevin is a moderately noisy bird. He can be a chatterbox during a few hours of the day, usually early, but later and at night he calms down. When he is very noisy, place a blanket over his cage, and this usually calms him down. I watch TV in the living room at night to keep him company, and around 10 p.m. I go to my room to let him sleep. That's basically the story behind Kevin. I've been taking care of him for 2 years, so I know exactly how he behaves and when he's agitated in a strange way. Speaking of unusual behavior, one night in December, around 11 p.m., Kevin started making noises while I was trying to sleep. I sleep with the door open since I live alone and need to be able to hear anything if something is going on at home. Hearing him make his screeching noises after escaping, especially so late at night, was certainly unusual and something was irritating. I went down to the living room to see what was bothering him. He was wide awake on the bottom perch of the cage. He looked at me and was saying things like, hello, and, how are you, and his own name, while he was bobbing his head up and down, moving his whole body like he was dancing. I tried to feed him but he wouldn't eat, so I covered him with the blanket hoping he would stop. I was in the kitchen when I stopped, because he was still making the noises and I had a feeling he wasn't going to stop. Having worked the next day, I couldn't afford to lose sleep over him. I didn't really know what to do. To this day I'm not exactly a bird expert. I went back to the room and discovered him. He was still doing his little dance, shaking his head and body and making sounds of distress. I didn't realize it until I thought I heard something in the pantry closet, just a few feet from his cage. I walked over and placed my hand on the pantry light switch, which was outside the door. The door has one of those big glass panels that a lot of pantry doors have, so when you turn on the light, you can see the silhouette of a body inside. My fight or flight response was activated, and I chose to fight. I opened the door screaming, trying to get the adrenaline flowing, and grabbed the man in the pantry, throwing him to the floor. He tried to revive, but I took him down easily and immobilized him with what I could describe as a headlock. He was a homeless-looking man in his 50s with a distinctive smell. I yelled at him, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" He managed to grab my face, possibly to poke my eyes out or something, but he kept squeezing his neck and punching him. All this time, Kevin was going crazy in the cage. It seemed faint enough that I literally ran to the nearest phone and quickly returned, keeping it on the ground while I called 911. The man was taken to jail, but he had no identification, nothing. He was homeless and had nothing to his name, and so it was considered what some people call a trial by trial, meaning even if I tried to sue him, I wouldn't get anything out of him. He had broken into my desk cupboard that night and opened jars of peanut butter, boxes of cookies and crackers, and all kinds of canned and packaged foods. If it weren't for my father's parrot, I don't know what else that man would have taken or done in my house. I'm grateful to Kevin, and I like to think that a part of my dad is watching over me through that bird. This story takes place when I was in my penultimate year of high school. For context, here's a little background information. At that time, I was a pretty involved student, took all the hard classes, and was in some first-team sports. Somehow I was always busy and didn't have much time to myself, and part of me was grateful for that, because it provided me with an escape from a world where my parents had recently separated and my older brother had just gone to the faculty. It was just me and my little brother then. He was also a swimmer and a smart boy in his own way. We were very similar, even to this day, but probably because of the stress that the family situation placed on us at the time, we didn't get along at all. On one of those wet Midwestern winter days, I had spent my time at school and swimming and still had to sit down for several hours to do homework. This time, I had to write an essay for an advanced class that I wasn't really interested in. I left my swim bag by the door when I got home and looked around to see if anyone was home. Empty. Dad must be out with Reese at swim practice, as his club team had pool time after the school team finished. I popped a handful of Cheez-Its into my mouth and went down to the basement to my office to do some schoolwork. The house was a middle-class, two-story house with an unfinished basement except for what I called my office. In a past career, my father used to work from home, but he no longer did so. I was the only one who used this space, so my family, or what was left of it, just called it Quinn's office. I walked across the concrete floors and loose rugs to the only finished room in the basement. I turned on the CFL light. It was like any other night after training. I still had hours of homework ahead of me, so I turned on the computer and started typing. I had been typing for an hour, trying to describe what the concept of hedonism and the picture of Dorian Gray meant to me, as best I could or as convincingly as I could. Out of the dark, I heard my little brother call to me, "Quinny, Quinny, come up here." Almost reflexively, I responded, "Reese, I'm working, what do you need?" We used to shout around the house like brothers do, but it took me a minute to realize I didn't hear him come home. I got no response for a few minutes, until again I heard my little brother's voice humming, "Quinny, Quinny, come up here." It was strange to hear those words pass across the dark concrete floor. He should be at swim practice. I shouted back asking if he needed anything, but again I got no response. I thought about just going back to my writing, but the family situation was delicate, to say the least, and I didn't want to get into trouble if my brother really needed something. I decided to get up and find out for myself. I ran upstairs. I climbed the basement stairs the only way a high schooler can, and called out to my brother again, "Reese, what's going on? I'm really busy." I searched the main floor looking for my little brother or any signs that he was home. No shoes, no backpack, so he wasn't at home, and there was no car in the garage either. The only reason my dad would be out now would be to pick him up. Satisfied, I returned to the stairs when I heard my little brother's voice ring out, "Quinny, Quinny, come up here." This time, every hair on my body stood up. It just didn't make sense. He had to be at training, and if he really needed me, he would have come to me. I went to the bottom of the stairs to the second floor and called out to him once again, "Reese, what's going on? Are you okay?" For a minute there was no response. "Reese, I'm really busy, can you tell me what's going on?" It was quiet for too long as I stared at the dark stairs. Logically, I had no reason to believe anyone was up there, until I heard Reese's voice speak calmly this time, and not hum like before, "Quinny, Quinny, get up here." "What?" I asked softly. I couldn't understand the situation. I took a quick inventory of any likely scenarios: break-in, wrong voice, a prank. I would have seen something by now. It had to be Reese, and maybe helping him would make me a good brother. Then I started walking up the stairs, my heart pounding with each step. I was about to reach the dark second floor when I heard the buzzing of the garage door motor. I ran back up the stairs and looked out the window. It was my dad's sedan, and he and my little brother were getting out of the car. I stumbled from the window to the hallway where they would enter and felt my heart almost stop beating. I collapsed to the floor and started crying uncontrollably. This happened about 15 years ago. When I was a kid, I was with my best friend, Jackson, at some abandoned family resort or bungalow colony in New York. It was off a main road and then down a private dirt path. It was a fairly large property, with several old abandoned buildings, including at least 10 small bungalows, a main hall, a few bathroom stations, and an indoor pool house. Additionally, there was an outdoor pool, a shuffleboard area, and a children's playground. Everything was old, worn out, and there was tall, overgrown grass over everything. We found this place accidentally once, walking along Route 209, but we didn't explore it that day. We returned another night, after sunset. The sun was leaving the sky, it was getting very dark, but we didn't want to come during the day for fear of being caught and accused of trespassing. We brought walkie-talkies and flashlights to communicate with each other when we separated. We started by looking at the bungalows together. Most of them looked the same and were relatively small, with 1 or 2 bedrooms each, a small kitchen, and a bathroom each. Some had small seating areas. Halfway through exploring the bungalows, I got separated from Jackson because he was moving slowly. I tried to enter the building that appeared to be the main hall or office, something, but all the entrances were locked. I walkie-talked Jackson to say the big building was locked, but he didn't respond. I wondered if I was out of range of where he was. 2 minutes later I found myself in one of the 2 bathroom buildings. It was probably a 400 square foot building. There were no doors in the building, which was unusual, just 2 large openings, one for the men's bathroom and one for the women's. I remember the signs were faded and worn. Then I saw these red marks on the dirty concrete bathroom floor. Now, I'm not going to say they looked like bloody footprints, but I couldn't explain what those red marks could be at the time, and I still can't say for sure now. Regardless, it was completely dark inside the bathroom, around that corner, and that was the first building I was afraid to enter. I tried to walkie-talkie Jackson again, hoping he was in range this time. I pressed the button on the walkie and said, "Hey, where are you?" When I released it, I heard the beeping sound that the receiving walkie-talkie makes after receiving a message, coming from inside the bathroom. It almost gave me a heart attack. So I thought Jackson must already be inside, hence the red footprints. I called his name and it echoed inside the bathroom. I was actually about to go into the bathroom, thinking he was hiding from me, playing a prank, when I heard Jackson's voice call from the distance, behind me, in the dark of night. I heard him approaching, but I couldn't see him in the dark, although he obviously saw my light. So I yelled back, "I found your walkie-talkie." I was about to go into the bathroom, but then he said back, "Don't go in there, I've never gone in there." That's when I turned around and quickly left there. I pressed and released the walkie-talkie button quickly, causing it to beep again inside that completely dark women's bathroom. Jackson and I looked at each other for half a second and then started running in the direction we came from. We arrived back at Route 209 and had to stop to catch our breath. It was then that Jackson told me that, inside one of the bungalows he entered, he tried to walkie-talkie me, but I wasn't responding, which meant we must be out of range. But then he heard a noise in the bungalow's living area. When he turned around, his flashlight revealed an older woman almost running towards him. He dropped his walkie-talkie and flashlight and ran out of the bungalow. He ran in the dark and hid, avoiding making noise for fear of being followed. He hid for a questionable amount of time before looking around and seeing my flashlight on the other side of the field, near the bathrooms. The most likely explanation to me was that some drug addict was hiding or living in that abandoned bungalow and, for some reason, ran toward Jackson and grabbed his walkie-talkie. What was she doing in that bathroom, who knows? Maybe drugs, maybe the bungalow bathroom didn't work. But what I don't know is why there was a trail of what looked like blood inside. These are my theories, but I can't explain everything, and that's the scariest part.